to Solutions Rising. I'm Rachel Branch, and I am delighted to welcome Bill Schmick to Solutions Rising for part 2 to continue our May 6th program. Taking a Solutions Rising program with Bill is just such a pleasure, and engaging him keeps me on my toes, a little bit more than on my toes, to say the very least. And his knowledge and sharing of that knowledge is a joy to behold. Bill has enjoyed an impressive and extensive career in the big money world. On Wall Street, then in a money management firm, and now as a very active retiree, writing weekly columns on monetary conditions that affect us all. And if I may say, columns that are easily and logically understood. Welcome, Bill, and it's just great to have you back.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Rachel, for that introduction.
You're quite welcome. In part 1 of our program, we had a further discussion on populism, went from there to the approximately 80-year historical monetary cycles, their ramifications in our lives, and then proceeded to discuss this new era of changes. Changes neither of us or our audience were prepared for. You probably were prepared, or ever have seen in our lifetimes. So I would like to continue with the ongoing happenings and what is occurring in the United States and its effect worldwide, especially the ominous trade wars and tariffs. And of course, we are going to get in this very special book by Neil Howe called The Fourth Turning is Here.
Yes. Yes.
You can go where you like and I'll follow.
Oh, well.
We might have to do a part 3.
Yes. I just mentioned that Moody's had just downgraded our debt from AAA, and so that was the last rating agency to do so. So all 3 of the top ones have now downgraded our debt.
It's very serious, isn't it?
It is serious. I mean, it's like taking the nation's temperature and finding out that we have a fever, a debt fever. And it's interesting because at the same time, just this weekend, the Republican Party passed out of committee the great, big, beautiful bill that the president wants the country to pass. And that, as it stands right now, just increases the deficit and increases the debt in the face of already climbing debt and deficits. So it's not a pretty picture.
Even that we're in the trillions is just frightening.
Yes, it is. It is. These are big numbers. Although I'm not as concerned about the debt as I am about the deficit. And I don't want to get wanky here about that, but the truth is that for a long, long time, many countries have had debt way over the amount of level that they should have. And we're approaching the same thing. The most recent was Japan. Now, I'm going to shock you by saying this, and why am I not so concerned about the debt? Well, the fact is we have on one hand the Treasury, which issues debt, and we have the Federal Reserve that prints money, both arms of the government. Now, what Japan did with their debt, which had grown for 30 years, they simply had the government buy back all their government debt. And where did they get the money? The Japanese central bank printed it.
Which is what we do, too. We print money, don't we?
So
Yes.
could we do the same thing?
Oh.
Yes, we could. Our trillions in debt, I think it's 36 trillion. It's just the matter of printing money. Who prints money? Our central bank, just like Japan's central bank. Could we print $36 trillion worth of money and give it to the Treasury to buy back our debt? That's what Japan did. That's what many other countries have done in the past. Now, a lot of people may be upset about that. Foreign holders of our debt might be unhappy about that. But when push comes to shove, and we have no other way of reducing the debt, it seems, that is an alternative. And I fully expect over the next several years that that's exactly what we're going to do.
Oh my goodness.
So there goes the debt. Now, is it sleight of hand? Of course it's sleight of hand. Okay? However, look at the Japanese market. They did this 3 or 4 years ago. Has the Japanese stock market fallen apart? No. Has their economy fallen apart? Quite the contrary. It's moved back up.
So doing that stabilized the country.
Sure. And in history, when other countries have done that in the past, it's also done the same thing for them. So I don't want to get into the conversation about the debt. The debt is bad and all the rest. If you and I had it, sure, I'd like to be able to print money and send it credit card wise and pay off my debts. I can't do that, but a government can, and I suspect we will.
Well, I'd kind of like to go to Fort Knox and get some of those gold bars and go back on the gold
Yes.
See,
Well, that's interesting you said that, because what happened was in the 70s, Richard Nixon did it. Up until then, the dollar was pegged to the price of gold. Okay? And what he said was, well, that's old. We shouldn't do that. And we're going to unpeg the dollar to the price of gold. Well, they said, what would be the value of the dollar then if we don't have gold to peg it to? Well, just the faith in the dollar. So what happened is that attitude, which the world accepted after grumbling, was that the dollar was worth what you think it's worth. Okay? And if the economy in the United States grows and we're the most powerful military force in the world, we are the best democracy, if all the rest of that occurs, then the value of the dollar is backed by the full faith of the United States, which is the best country in the world, right?
and it has held for lots and lots of years.
But it's all based on
Yeah.
what we think of the US dollar, right?
Yeah.
So we could do the same. What we think is that our debt should be down. How should we do it? We'll print $36 trillion and the US Treasurer will buy back that debt from you.
So then what happens to Treasury bonds?
Oh,
Is that affected by buying that debt?
it could be up or down. Who knows how they will do it. But in the case of the Japanese government bonds, they didn't go up or down. That just was constant buying them, ready market for it. So it could happen again, and I think it will, because I don't think at this moment that the government has the will to reduce our debt.
No.
So,
What's going on in Dubai
yes,
is
yes,
quite
yes,
horrific.
right,
I don't know any enemy to think that another country could give a
right.
Air Force One, give a plane. I mean, this is conflict of interest
It is.
multiplied.
Well, times are changing, okay? And what I'm clear about is that we can't go back at this point.
Oh no,
Okay.
I agree with that.
We are facing a brave new world in this country and the world, actually.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I have influenced me over the last several years is actually this book, The Fourth Turn.
And I was just going to say, may we segue into The Fourth Turn
Yes.
is Here by Neil Howe. And
Yes.
you and I apparently were doing mental telepathy. And I want to go through the four turnings and have you discuss each of them.
Okay.
This is in Neil Howe's book, The Seasons of History. And if you talk about each one, would be lovely.
Okay.
The first turning is a high, an upbeat era of strengthening institutions and weakening individualism, when a new civic order implants and an old values regime decays.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
That's the high, the first turn. And Neil and his partner in their first book indicated that where the four turnings come in. It's a generational idea that four turnings take roughly, this is not a science, 80 to 100 years, which roughly, that's a generation, okay? And their argument is that throughout history, the American history, and they've actually argued further back, European history, Asian, whatever, but we'll stick with America, that these four turnings have occurred over and over again since this country was founded. And the idea behind it is that these four turnings roughly resemble the four seasons of the world, okay? The spring, the summer, the fall, and the winter. And so there's a natural rhythm to this idea of political and economic four turnings. The first, as you mentioned, the first turning is the high. And for everyone here, let's look at our history. When was the last time we had an honest to God first turning? And that would probably be in the 1950s.
After World War II.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Because at that time, Eisenhower was the president. Everybody could buy a car. There was an explosion of goodwill and community brought on by the World War II. Remember, this country had to pull together. Women, for the first time, were the bosses in the factories, while the men overseas were fighting a war, a life and death war. So they worked together, okay, those here at home and those that were fighting overseas, and created amongst themselves, these Americans, community, a real community, life and death community, bread and butter community. And that, with the conclusion of World War II and our victory, okay, this sense of community where we were the winner just exploded in this country. We had a can-do society as long as we pulled together. So GIs came back and they just went to college and came out of college and started industries. Women came home, created families, and the population boomed. The road system had
Not
been
for
built.
everybody, though.
Not for everybody, but for the majority of Americans.
And there was still that aura and feeling of community.
Yes.
And sense of community.
At that time, the community was so strong that people didn't even lock their doors.
We didn't.
No. We had Levittowns that exploded all over the country. And families, for the first time, were able to move into these beautiful places in the suburbs and get out of the tenements where they existed in New York or Chicago or wherever else. Our institutions flourished because we had a can-do attitude. So people respected our institution, our government institutions, and so forth. And it was a golden age of America. And that basically, if you think about it, it's very similar to the spring season, where all the seeds that we had planted in the earth come out and explode, beauty and color, and grow. And the weather is invigorating, and nature just explodes all over. So that was the last first turning. And as I said, we're talking about four turnings generationally. That's 20 to 25 years. So we'll say that first turning was in the 50s into the 60s and somewhere in there.
The interstate highway system.
Yes.
People travel. President Eisenhower.
Exactly.
Everybody being able to, if you could afford a car, go places.
And they did, with the family, right?
Yep.
And the family was the core social unit. Okay? The more kids you had, the better. Everyone went to church.
We got sent to church. Yes.
Yes, all the men had short haircuts, which is a hangover from the GI situation, and on and on. So it was a beautiful time. And I could tell you that prior to that period, 1950s, we had the same sort of experiences prior to that in the 1980s, in the 1880s, and before that in the 1780s, and so forth. So this is not a unique occurrence. And then at some point, the first turning began to turn into the second turning.
Okay, I'm going to read The Second Turning by Neil Howe. The second turning is an awakening, a passionate era of spiritual upheaval when the civic order comes under attack from a new values regime. So now you're starting into the 60s, or you're
Yes.
starting into...
Yes,
Yeah.
that's my generation, the baby boomers. And let's date it somewhere around 1964. And why? Because that was the assassination of John F. Kennedy. 63.
Yeah.
Okay, so
And then,
so
then Martin Luther King, Malcolm
Right.
X, our leaders,
exactly.
Medgar Evers.
Right.
Yeah.
So here, I am a baby boomer. I remember I was in my last year of high school, I think, when I heard on the radio the assassination of Kennedy. It shocked the world, and it brought us back.
I was at Shaw Air Force Base then.
Okay.
Yeah. When I'm alert,
That was our turning point.
South Carolina. Yes, a huge turning point.
When-
Especially with perhaps what John F. Kennedy might have been able to accomplish.
Yes.
The hope.
Make America great again.
Hope.
So it's,
Great again? No.
well, make America better.
Yeah.
But he didn't get to do that.
Still hoping the
We-
sense
the-
of community where everybody,
Right.
you,
We
Back
suffered,
now.
we
Yeah.
grieved together.
yeah.
And then as we moved forward, 65, 66, we started hearing about the Vietnam War. And then there was the draft.
And of course, I'm in Tripoli, Libya.
You're in Tripoli,
At
Libya.
Willis Air Base during
And-
65 to 67. So,
Okay, and I'm 1966, graduate from high school, Catholic high school, male Catholic high school, and in Philadelphia. And in our senior prom, I had shown up at the United States Marine Corps boot camp at Paris Island.
whoa.
I had signed up in school. Bad kid, okay, lower income family. My last year at school, I was in fights and this and this. The Jesuit father would stand me up in front of the room and say, "Here, that's Schmick." And I want to warn everyone in this room, don't be Schmick. He's already signed up to go in the service. And the only reason that we're going to graduate him this year is because we don't want him to die in Vietnam without a high school education.
Oh my goodness. These
So-
personal stories relate to the second turning.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
So-
but Paris Island. You must have been scared out of your mind. Paris Island was considered really
That was tough.
horrific.
Yes,
And
yes.
you got through it?
Uh,
The training.
At that time, and I remember to this day, I was a gang kid, and everyone in my neighborhood either became a cop or a criminal. And for those of you who remember the first Rocky, it was filmed in my neighborhood.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so
Great film.
the point is that getting out of the ghetto, basically the white ghetto, and I saw Vietnam in the Marine Corps as just full of adventure and challenge. Now, I was 17 years old,
Yeah.
okay? So,
Rah-rah, serving your country and
Exactly.
supposedly having a
yes,
good time.
yes. So we won't go through the whole 60s and 70s, but remember what happened. People when I came out of the war, and I was in there for 4 years, 2.5 years of that in Vietnam, and came back disillusioned, angry, post-traumatic stress, not knowing what that was. And the world around me, okay, had altered. Now,
And our Vietnam veterans were not welcomed home.
not at all.
They put it on them instead of our government.
But let's look at what's happened. All the things in the first turning were called into question. Even to the point of the white-walled man's haircut. It was long hair. It was beards. No more was it a sweater and a shirt. It was buckskin, okay? It was free sex. It was all the drugs that you could take.
Yep.
What was it? It was the man, the pigs, anti-establishment, tear it down, burn your draft card, burn the flag. All of the first turning called into question.
Diana Odin in New York being killed making a bomb. The young people making
Yes.
bombs.
And students
It
on
was
campus shot down.
Yeah.
Police smashing protesters in the Democratic Convention in Chicago.
Kent State.
Assassinations.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King. Kennedy's brother. Oh my God. It went on and on. The burnings of Watts.
Yeah.
It just, the country started to disintegrate. Okay? And all the institutions that we had built up were called into question. And it continued further and further until we got to the third turning.
Okay, here's the third turning, is an unraveling. A downcast era of strengthening individualism and weakening institutions when the old civic order decays and the new values regime implants. So we're going to
1970s into the 80s. What happened? Well, the hair got a little shorter, but it was still around my neck. It was bell-bottom pants, okay, but and matching what kind of suits they were, and new music came around. People basically, like myself, moved from buckskins to Wall Street. Okay, it was a time where you got ahead. Individualism, thanks to the second turning, was the place to be. Okay, greed was great. Think of all the Wall Street movies where the hero was this crooked person, okay, that just made fortunes. That was the idea behind it. Use the institutions. You're smarter than the institutions. Politicians were elected, then re-elected, then tripled, and so forth.
Now, at that time, I'm at the Metro Denver Urban Coalition, and the National Urban Coalition was formed after Watts from government, religion, politicians, educators to solve urban problems around a table.
Right.
So that's
Solve
where I am.
urban problems.
Solve urban problems.
That meant, what was the problem? The urbans were the problem. There were problems building and building and building. Okay, back from a period where people moved from Levittown and they started moving back into the cities, okay? They rejected that Levittown living again, okay? So institutions started to crumble in ways that we couldn't even see. The political system, do we remember those years when we didn't vote and people just were concerned that democracy was falling apart because look at the voter turnout? And what did the voters say? There's really no difference between the Democrats and Republicans. They're all crooks. They're all in it for themselves. Nothing changes. People are just padding their wallets. Look at the people on Wall Street. They're out of control. While you were there, I was at one of the big firms on Wall Street. I came out of it, got an MBA after 2 years, cleaned up, although the hair was still a little long, and went on Wall Street. And there I was, the morning trades, the cavernous trading room. And what was happening? The guy that moved the cart of coffee through the trading room and the line of traders, well, Inside the foam cup was a packet of cocaine. And we'd pass them $100 for the coffee and underneath the cocaine. And the bathrooms were full of tip, 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 tip before the day. So this was the nature of it. And you couldn't wait for lunch because that's when you were drinking. And everybody was happy and everybody was making money and we were all doing our own thing in a go-go market. And that continued, and as the situation got worse and worse in the sense of it was all individuals, the divorce rate was up there around 50 or 53%. So why get married or get married 5 times, whatever the way you want to do it? You were locking your doors. Doors weren't open anymore. So, and there was a feeling in this country of malaise, unhappiness, hopelessness, and I guess we knew it. We, as a nation, we knew this was happening, but we felt that there was no alternative, that we were on this ride in which we had no control. Okay? And that began to encourage certain groups to start again thinking that maybe we had gone too far and that maybe something had to happen, but they weren't sure. And I'm talking about in the years like in the early 2000s. What was that Wall Street group that protested something? It was something Wall Street.
Occupy?
Occupy Wall
Yeah.
Street. Back in the early 2000s,
Yeah.
okay. It got the press and so forth, but kind of petered out. But it was a lot of young people, not baby boomers, but Gen X people that were doing that. And then what was the Republican early, same period of time? Ted Cruz was responsible. He was one of the instigators, very conservative.
Contract with America?
No, it was
Yeah.
even before that. It was a group of very conservative Republicans. At one point, Ted Cruz was leading it, and they actually forced the country into default for a week or two.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, at that time. Okay, these were early signs from this country that we were finishing the third turning and we were entering the fourth turning.
So here's the fourth turning. The fourth turning is a crisis, a decisive era of secular upheaval, when the values regime propels the replacement of the old civic order with a new one.
Right. And that's.
So you're saying this started in the, what, 2000?
I'll date it.
10 maybe?
I'll date it at 2000 and between 2007 and 2009.
Oh,
That was the financial
2008,
crisis.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a total shock to this country. It was a terrifying shock, and it actually shook us all to our core because it
really?
looked as if the entire financial system was disintegrating and blowing apart. Think about it. It not different, but not much different than the feelings that the country had when John F. Kennedy died.
Awful.
It was the same kind of electric throb, the negative, throughout the system, the economic and political system. And we made it through. But that was what I would date as the beginning of the fourth turning. Now, the fourth turning, which we are in the midst of, as I said, lasts anywhere from 20 to 25 years. So if we date it from 2009, where are we? We're in 2025, so 16, 17 years in, let's say 25 years. So maybe this doesn't even stop until something like 30, 35, 30, 34. It's again an art and a science, so we don't know for sure. And
Do you think this fourth turning is quite different from any other time in our history cyclically?
no,
You don't?
no. It has uniqueness to it, very similar to the uniqueness of the Depression and World War II. And before that, the Civil War. And also prior to World War II. I mean, World War One. So each fourth turning is unique, but it goes to the same place.
Well, I'm just thinking of my great grandfather, Arthur Gallup, who was treasurer of Arnold Print Works at the time in 1907. There was a crash like 2008.
Yes.
He worked for 2 years, put the company into voluntary receivership, and spent 2 years day and night, putting the company back together and paid every creditor 100 cents on the dollar plus 6% interest. I talked about this in 2009. Could you imagine anybody in 2009 paying a creditor 100% interest, 100% on the dollar plus 6% interest? I couldn't.
I can.
You can really?
The Federal Reserve.
Oh, okay.
That's exactly what they did. Exactly what they did. They saved the financial system, and they paid all the bills. Okay, they just printed money, tons of money, and made everybody whole again. That's what they did. That's how it was solved. Okay.
I guess the difference I'm looking at is everyday businesses or business.
Well, what's happened now?
And
How
we
is
are
it-
going to continue this.
Well-
if it's all right with Michael, unless you want to come back and do a part 3. It's entirely up to you.
Okay.
So
Well, either way, but
we'll go ahead.
so let's move on because we're in the fourth turning now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's going to last for some years. Okay. And everything is going to change. As I said to you before, we can't go back. So the protest and so forth to bring back the last 40 years is just not going to work. Okay. The future is what we're concerned about, and the future is the generations that we have ahead of us. Now, the bad news about the fourth turning is that normally the way we get out of it is there a conflict or some stressful situation from outside, an external force that forces the country together into a community again. World War II, for example, was the last external event that forced the country into a community again. Right now, I don't see where we have any community. We have the opposite. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I believe that we have to go further in the years, in the stress, until a conflict does occur. Now, what conflict that is, I have no idea.
But it could be nuclear war.
It
That's-
could certainly be nuclear
And
war.
that's what makes me look at the fourth turning saying, is this going to be an entirely different fourth turn?
It could be. It could be. We don't know that.
Or climate catastrophe. Again,
Climate
those
change
two
could be.
for me.
Well, yes. I would think, if you think about we're all preparing for World War III. And we all think it's going to be China invading Taiwan or Russia doing whatever. As a black swan event, it's probably not going to be that simply because we think it's going to be that. It's got to be something, I believe, that we know exists, but we do nothing about. And climate change certainly qualifies.
But it could also be a combination of Yemen and Ukraine and
It could be another
Middle
pandemic.
East. Absolutely. And
We don't know.
what's happening because of climate catastrophe and infections and the balance of our ecosystem
Yeah,
being undone.
Yeah.
It could be a combination of all of these.
it certainly could. So we don't know. Then there's no point in fretting about it
No.
until it occurs. Okay, and we won't know until we know. All we do know is that in the next 5 to 8 or 9 years, we have conflict and stress ahead of us. And that the solution does not lie in the past.
I think the solution, part of it's right here talking about it. But I also think, and of course, as we wind up, I want you to talk about children and grandchildren
Yes.
and those coming up, and how do we support them so that they understand what they will need to do educationally and with their lives to be able to face what is coming, what is here and coming ahead.
Okay. Well, since the fourth turnings are all about generations, and the power holders now are Gen X, and then the millennials on the way down. Let's talk from my point of view. The first thing that I wanted to say was in the financial, what can we expect? What can our generations expect in the future, in the next 10 years or so forth? The stock market will not be the stock market of the past.
No.
Okay, there will be very minor returns in both the bond and the stock market. That doesn't mean that there won't be areas in the stock market or bond market that go up 100 to 200 to 300% and then back down again. If I looked at the last period of populism in the 60s into the 80s, the stock market did absolutely nothing except on presidential election years. And in each of the election years, it went up 20%. Only that one year, and the rest of it tore it back down again over the period of 20 or 25 years. So that's the kind of thing we're thinking about. But I think beyond that, the investment choices of our generations coming up, are much different than what we are used to, where we're looking at income and assets and what their revenues are and what interest rates are doing. And let me explain to you why that's the case. The generations that are growing up now, let's say the oldest, the Gen X's, they came to be in the 70s. They got born then. And at the end of the 70s, we had 21% interest rates. So their whole life, they have seen interest rates decline. Okay? And the old arguments are arguments, well, when interest rates decline, prices go down, interest rates decline, growth speeds ahead. And for the last 40 years, that's exactly what happened, and global growth exploded. But the younger generation that grew up through that never benefited from that. Income equality was what they made out of this. So here we are now when they're in their investing public. What is their attitude towards income streams, revenues, low debt, all the rest of the things that are mantras of the financial system? Mm-hmm. They no longer believe that. That has caused them to live in their mother's basement.
And it doesn't have relevance to their lives either.
No. So what has relevance? We'll go back to one thing we talked about. Crypto. Bitcoin. Okay? Bitcoin has relevance. Why? Because it's equal. Bitcoin has relevance. Why? Because it's fair. Anybody could buy it. Anybody could sell it. Okay? The government has no deal with it. Okay? The same government that kept them in their mother's basements at 30 years old. The same government which is corrupt, that favors what? The 1% to 2% that are billionaires, right? Crypto represents their generation.
Really?
Yes. Yes. Okay, there's no income statement. There's no revenues. There's just Bitcoin. Now,
So if the price goes up and down, what's the protection for young people?
it's community. Oh. It's the Bitcoin community. The hold for, what are they called? The hodls. Hold until the day they die. Why? It's a community investment.
I find it really frightening. I would never buy a Bitcoin.
Because we're Warren Buffett's children.
Oh!
Okay.
Well, I'm pretty close to Warren Buffett's age.
Okay, but that's where we came from. But it isn't what the generations behind us are interested in. Look, as I told you, interest rates declined. And as it did, we had a huge technology boom in this country for 40 years. And these kids who are now adults grew up believing that technology was the answer to all of our problems. What is crypto? Technology. You can't see it?
But how does this help stop income inequality? I mean, you gotta have money to buy. You gotta have money to buy Bitcoin.
You can buy a Bitcoin for 50 cents if you want it, not a whole. You see, in other words, you could put 50 cents in Bitcoin today and have a piece of Bitcoin, all right? Or 20 years ago, you could have bought 1,000 and had one Bitcoin. If you did, it's now worth 100,000 if you held on. So the argument that I'm making is that it's called financial nihilism. Okay. What it means is that the values today that you and I believe in, to them, that has no intrinsic value whatsoever. It's worthless because it has been worthless to them all their lives. It has not paid them a bit. So today they look and they need to catch up. Okay, they need to catch up. They all want to be the billionaires, okay? And the avenues that the billionaires use, they don't believe in them any longer.
Understandably.
So what do they believe in? They believe in, if I believe in something and I convince you to believe in something, okay, then the price will go up. So during the COVID, for example, COVID 2021, 22, I saw companies like Hertz announce that they were going into bankrupt, and the stock went up 4 times. Okay, it had no income, it had debt up the wazoo, and yet it went up 4 times. Why? Because the community said, I believe in Hertz. Do you believe in Hertz? If we both believe in Hertz, let's buy it. And they did, in thousands. The same thing that happened with AMC, a bankrupt movie company that nobody went to because it was COVID. And yet that stock went up 10 times and on. And I can tell you today, Tesla's a great example. Tesla had no earnings, but they had EVs. And the young said, that's technology. And that's clean, that cleans up pollution. And I believe in those things. So I'm buying Tesla. Are you buying Tesla? Yeah, man, I'm buying Tesla too. We got it, and it went up 1,000%. That's where the younger generations are going. And right today, I can pick out 5, 6, 10 stocks that they're in, and they're pushing them up, and they'll come down and up and so forth. But their whole attitude towards investment is radically different.
People are trying to be environmentally careful too, and Tesla certainly was that. Of course, now there are problems with it, and we'll go into Musk. Would you consider coming back for a part 3? Did you call it financial nihilism?
Yes.
And we would go from there and talk more about the fourth turning, because now we're getting into the guts of the everyday person and this generation. And I would also like to talk about those many elderly elected officials who will not get out to let the younger generation be part of this hope that someday we might have a representative government.
Yes, I think you're right on that. I think that I do not believe that Donald Trump is going to lead us out of this crisis.
No.
I don't think we know who will lead us out of this crisis.
It might be a little bit of every person. It
could
might not be one leader. It might be a whole series of leaders and groups coming together who are creating their own sense of community, because we know how dire the circumstances are.
Yeah.
And I think you are certainly being part of that statement. That's those of us of whatever age who really truly care about community and our children and those to follow in the world ahead.
Yep.
Thank you, Bill Schmick.
You're welcome.
I hope you will come back. We need to do part 3. This is too deep a conversation. And if each one of us picked up one problem and solved it, imagine the incredible view we would all have of solutions rising. we hope we've given you some information on finding solutions in your life. Please be part of the solution. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.